and we are live with another episode of Go FUD Yourself. This is a really exciting week because JD's gone. I feel like JD is never gone. So I get to have guests, and I got to just pick all of my favorite DeFi people to come talk about the world with me. And favorite of favorites is Lindsay. Lindsay, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you, Kiara?
Fantastic. Happy that you're here. Lindsay joins us from Tashi, but Lindsay and I also both live in Canada, so we have a lot to say about that in our crypto arms race today.
We definitely do, and I promise not to talk about the weather.
Do you want to talk about the weather? It might be like a more palatable experience for viewers.
You know, I think people really love fall, especially since pumpkin spice is introduced into every part of our coffee grocery store experience. So
Yeah, have you tried the latest pumpkin spice enema?
Wow. We're live. Maybe call me later. Actually not a fan of pumpkin spice. Anything.
Yeah, that's really reasonable.
Cinnamon
Is it just the spices? Like when you order a pumpkin spice thing, is it just like nutmeg or do they mix pumpkin in?
I'm pretty sure it is some sort of artificial flavor with 10 levels of coloring and 8 pounds of sugar, and you'll probably die sooner, 10 years off your life, every coffee you have.
Well, as you can see, we're going to be really funny about everything today. But today is the crypto arms race, and because we're both in Canada, we're going to start with Canada. There's a couple of good news pieces and some really bad news pieces. From Canada, we're going to move over to Argentina, mostly talking about inflation and their current president. After Argentina, we're going to stay in a warm area and go to the Caribbean. The Caribbean has had the most successful CBDC launch of any country that I've seen so far, in my personal opinion, and that continues as they look to have more retail uses for their CBDCs. Kind of exciting unless you hate CBDCs, then it's super not exciting at all. From there, we'll go over to Europe, where everyone is just complying with regulation. It's like, it's a little bit boring because it's like this country has complied, France has complied, Germany's complying, everyone's complying. Even Russia is trying to comply with regulation. That is our episode today. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Is that a banger for you? Are you a hip hop person?
I am a hip hop person.
Okay, I picked right. We have 3 now, so 3 intros.
I like it all. I like all the music.
Before we jump in, Lindsay is joining us from Tashi. Do you want to give us any important, exciting dates or anything like that about Tashi that might maybe be coming up?
I do. I don't know if you're following what's happening in the Cosmos ecosystem right now, but we have very exciting things happening. We have wormhole assets coming. We have native USDT on Kava, native USDC from Noble, and all of those things are coming to Tashi within the next few weeks via the wormhole bridge, and then also just regular IBC. So we also have a token sale going on until the 25th, and then probably launching shortly after that. So last chance.
Very exciting. If people want to purchase your token, where should they go?
So we have all our links on our link tree, which is also linked to our Twitter at Cosmos Markets. The O in Cosmos is a 0, the first one. Just it sucks, but it is what it is.
It's just really degen. You just have to know what you're looking for.
Yeah. And then also there's Tashi.finance that you can go to. We have all our links there as well. Discord, Telegram.
Okay, amazing. Well, if you love Lindsay today and you want to argue with her about the Canadian government, definitely do that on their Discord. They'll love it. On that note, do you remember when BitBuy merged with WonderFi because that was the only way that they could proceed under Canadian regulation?
I don't remember that it merged. I'm just happy that it did.
I think it was in March 2022 from what I could find, or maybe they made news of it in March 2022 and then it happened a little bit later. But basically there were 3 major companies that in Canada that ended up merging and acquiring one another. WonderFi ended up being the head of them, but there were 3, BitBuy including one. Part of this merger acquisition was that they would continue to operate autonomously, as you can see from the news today. But this was basically to meet all regulatory requirements and offer a full suite of products for consumers. And they're looking to expand that by working with local coin on Bitcoin ATMs. Have you ever used a Bitcoin ATM?
I haven't actually. I kind of had to like look into exactly how it works because I didn't know how you receive your Bitcoin.
Right.
So I guess you have to have a digital wallet already set up, which to me, I mean, I guess that makes it easier for someone that uses mobile, especially like is DeFi on their phone. I'm like a hardcore PC user. I can't do anything on my phone. So yeah.
Bitcoin ATMs, well, I remember trying to use a Bitcoin ATM in like 2016 or something in Remedy Cafe, which is Edmonton's like chai restaurant.
Yeah.
And they were the first retailer to accept Bitcoin in Edmonton, Remedy Cafe. This is not a plug for Remedy. It's just interesting because you can still go and every Remedy has a Bitcoin ATM. I wonder if the owner of Remedy is like part of Bitcoin Well or something because every Remedy has a Bitcoin ATM. But I always think that it doesn't look very legit because right above the Bitcoin ATM is this like plastic laminated sign that says like, if you think you're being scammed, call the RCMP. And like obviously they're required to display some sort of message, legally for compliance, but like just write it into your software and put it on the ATM itself as opposed to this like weird haphazard thing that does make it look like a scam.
I wonder what, I'm not even sure like what kind of fees a Bitcoin ATM would have.
I think it's a percentage, just like our
percentage just on whatever fiat you use. And do they accept like all types of credit, debit?
I was talking about Bitcoin Well because they're in Edmonton, and Bitcoin Well has 250 Bitcoin ATMs across Canada, which seems like a lot until you think about Local Coin, who has over 920 Bitcoin ATMs across Canada. So I can see why BitBuy decided to work with Local Coin. That's more than half of the market share of Bitcoin ATMs. I would love to meet someone who's actually used one because I don't know who is. Like, I don't know how we have so many of them. We probably have over 2,000 in Canada, and like I don't know a single person who's using them.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go. I'll come to Calgary, or we'll drive to Red Deer. We'll meet in like Black Falls.
I'm trying to think of like the use case of like why you would use one. And then I try to think of someone that, wants to get into crypto, doesn't know how, figures out how to get a wallet. But most of the people I know that are not really crypto people, they are using Questrade or Wealthsimple, but then again, you're not really owning your asset. Seems like another FTX thing to me.
I feel like maybe Bitcoin ATMs came to fruition when people like pre-mobile, you know what I mean? When not everyone had a smartphone. And so you might go and maybe you thought it was safer, just like a banking ATM. Maybe it's targeted at an older generation of people to get them onboarded. But I don't really know. So if you're into Bitcoin ATMs, you can now use your BitBuy wallet on all Local Coin ATMs. Very exciting, I guess. I assume that they're being compliant with their terrible RCMP laminated messages above all of their ATMs, which is kind of our next topic, is that Canada is really trying to be compliant in the world. So they have recently, they're announcing that they're going to announce, basically it hasn't actually happened, they're announcing that they're going to announce that Canada is going to comply with the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision recommendations that came out December 16th, 2022. So, I mean, I guess it took us a while to read that document. But
this is really exciting. I mean, prior to this, it's just like, you're doing the wrong thing, so we're shutting you down. At least now they're starting to give some guidelines as to like how you can operate. And I'm just really excited for, I would say, like the asset management to come, because I think people will be more interested in diversifying to crypto once they have someone that they can consider like an advisor that they trust. So I think that's pretty exciting that this is finally coming to fruition. But there will be some sort of guidelines.
The other thing that's a little bit interesting about this is that a lot of the new regulations will apply to TradFi banks who want to be involved in crypto. And so while we might see some clarity from a retail perspective, you'll probably also see more clarity if you do want to be investing in, futures or something to that end via your bank. So that's kind of interesting. They did have a consultation process that was open until September 20th, but I didn't hear about it, so I did not participate. Did you participate?
Oh no, I did not participate.
No, I feel as though they could have advertised on like Brave or like Index or something, so that people actually participated. But that's fine. That's cool.
Another reason this is really exciting is, finally, let's say you have most of your assets in crypto, which can be true for me especially.
For many of us.
They might actually, recognize that they are worth something, which is good. I think it's a positive shift forward for blockchain finance.
Mm-hmm. Now, just to be clear on it, they have looked at all kinds of crypto exposure. So I believe that Enrique is going to send a link on Twitter to this whole document so that you can read it if you want. But basically, it goes over collateral factors, hedge recognition, capital requirements, the different classifications of different crypto types, stabilization mechanisms for crypto versus unbacked assets, and they actually group them into group 1 and group 2, and then there are different requirements based on those things. And then they're also exploring dematerialized assets, which at first I thought were probably NFTs, but are actually much closer to the concept that a chain dies and you no longer have your assets. So if you're interested, take a look. It's pretty exciting. I am happy to see them do this, especially as our fiat currency continues to fail, which is a great for you, Lindsay, hating.
A great segue for our next topic.
I did take a look, and our current inflation is purportedly, as of 2 days ago on CBC, is only 4%. But I've also read that in some regions, grocery inflation is up to 18%. So I'm not sure who to believe.
I feel like I've been beating my head against the wall with this one for years now. I mean, our current leadership seemed like they skipped Econ 101 and recently injected $600 billion cash into the Canadian system, which created this inflationary crisis. And now basically people can't afford to eat, they can't afford to live, they can't afford to heat their homes. Personally, my grocery bill is over 50% higher.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that that's probably on the lower side. I mean, you have 4 items in your cart, you're already basically at $100.
Like, yeah, that's what you get to eat this week.
I don't know. I don't know how they expect families to feed their children.
Yeah, or pay their mortgage or their rent.
But then again, that's just it. Like those that are locked into fixed mortgages, I mean, the banks they're losing on the interest.
Yeah, but even if you have a fixed mortgage, it renews, right, every few years.
Yeah.
And so my mortgage rate was under 2%, and mortgage rates, if I had a mortgage today, would be over 7%. And like, I clearly would not be able to live in my home, right? And I'm not a single parent struggling kind of person. So what's everyone else doing if I wouldn't be able to live in my home, right? That's what I try to think of. And I live in Edmonton, which is definitely not a recession-proof city. If you drove around Edmonton about 4 years ago, you would think, oh, it's so nice here. And if you drove around now, you would think, wow, there are so many condemned homes and people who can't afford new clothes or food and panhandlers. And it's suddenly quite a dangerous place to live. And I wonder what that's like for other Canadian cities.
It's a pretty dire situation.
Yeah, it's quite brutal.
I think people don't even sorry, excuse me. I think people haven't even looked at an even larger perspective. Like these are also commercial mortgages. Mm-hmm. These are business mortgages. Like this is the way this is trending is a massive banking crisis. So
did you see
Canada's looking?
Did you see that they've removed the client consumption tax, but basically they removed GST on building new apartment buildings?
I did see that. I see that they're just trying all these last ditch efforts to cover up poor management. And I mean, absolutely. We'll increase the carbon tax because people can afford that right now.
I found a stat on the Government of Alberta website that says residential vacancy in Calgary declined by 27.1% in the last 5 years. So I feel like they had enough time to have responded to this sooner, because building a bunch of apartment buildings over the next 5 years is not going to help with the housing crisis today. So
we have had because Calgary's kind of been, especially our downtown sector has been, the office buildings have been empty due to COVID, due to just all these things. So they've actually had quite cool projects come in, and built low-income housing in these buildings. And so I think maybe that has something to do with the vacancy rate potentially, and maybe we're attracting more investment because of Danielle Smith. I don't know. Not saying anything.
You know who else is like having the worst time with inflation?
I do. I do know who else is having time.
So I have to say out loud, so reports say that Argentina's inflation is at over 124%, which is obscene. But what I wonder is, what are they told locally? So here we're told that our inflation is at about 4%. How accurate is that, and how much of that is a media spin? And what are other countries reading about Canada in terms of our inflation rate? Because 124% in an annual inflation rate is obscene. Like, nobody would be able to buy anything.
There's just so much to say on this topic. It's unbelievable how our purchasing power is just so deflationary. Like, whatever we make and save today, if you're not investing it, if you're not making money on your money, then you will not be able to afford to live by the time you retire. And it's even worse in these other countries where they have maybe corrupt governments, maybe not, but they have these crazy like inflationary problems. And I think that's what brings us back to why crypto is so good. And I hate that a lot of people that aren't in crypto think it, aids and embeds criminals, because really it can save the very, very basic person that just wants to save for their retirement.
They're saying that a third of Argentina's population is using crypto daily.
And you can see why, because they can actually make money that holds its value.
What is interesting, though, about that is that they recently voted in their new president, Milei, or is he still in the race? Still leading the race. They haven't voted yet. My bad. But part of why he got past their version of the primaries is that he was saying that he was super pro crypto. Fantastic. And now that they're past the primaries, he's actually moved into being pro-dollarization. So they want to get rid of the peso.
I heard from a good friend. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I heard from a good friend that he just had a really cool interview on Tucker Carlson.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's just, not a politician, just a pretty successful regular person that just saw something wrong with the government and wanted to go for it, and they're leading. And that's seeming to become almost like a trend right now.
Oh, I'm down for it. I do have to say, before we move on to that the dollarization is interesting, because we're seeing a lot of their neighbors go for de-dollarization by trying to join BRICS. And so I think this might also be that beginning of the rift between dollarization and de-dollarization, and seeing nations be split by ideology as opposed to by geography, which we haven't seen in a really long time, like since I was a little kid. Because I'm old.
You're not old, but maybe even before that. I think we're about the same age.
Actually, so it is interesting what you said about him being a politician coming from a regular life. I considered recently running for Edmonton City Council, not because I would be a good city councilor or because I have any interest in that job, like at all, but because I look at the city council and I think, oh, you don't represent me or my neighbors or my friends. And if we have all of these people who don't look anything like us, act anything like us, or believe anything like us, we're not going to live in a city that we like. And so I considered running solely on the platform that I wouldn't wear a suit, you could pay me less, and you didn't have to give me a parking space. And that was it.
I would take the parking space. We live in Canada.
Well, they costed the parking spaces for downtown Edmonton parking. This is probably pre-COVID. Was like, so because of the prime place of the parking and the daily parking rate, it ended up being like an $8,000 bonus by providing parking. And so I was like, just don't give me
$1,000 a year for parking in Edmonton. Who knew?
I mean, it's a city estimate, so it's inaccurate, but still.
Don't want to ask what Calgary is, but I appreciate that so much. I think that's amazing. I would love to also, I've considered running for politics so many times, and my husband, he is just, all politicians are evil. I'm like, you think I'm evil? You think I'm
going to make you a great politician, just spinning it.
There's good people. There's corruption everywhere. There's bad and good people in all roles and all institutions. And the only reason I thought about not doing it, even though I would love to, is I feel like it can be a massive burden on your family. And
Absolutely.
I'm totally family first, but it's still always in the back of my mind that, we need people in the good fight, whatever that is and whatever you believe that is. But
Well, also people who are actually representative, right? Like I live in a pretty blue collar neighborhood and our city councilor has never gone to a warehouse, I think. So like there's just no way that they're possibly representing well, right?
yeah, I mean, I think having people, working class people, run for positions is fantastic. I mean, career politicians just seem to say what they think people want to hear, and that you're right, they're not actually representing the people. So
As you can tell, Lindsay and I have a
here we
lot of
go.
opinions about Canada and Canadian politics.
Great.
So Argentina has decided they're going for dollarization. Meanwhile, the Caribbean is doubling down on their CBDC. I say the Caribbean generally, as though there aren't individual countries there, but this is important because the sand dollar, which I think was actually DR, was the most successful CBDC launch. And now other Caribbean countries are starting to take note of that, and they've been running their own pilot projects. So Jamaica is now trying to, although they haven't had great adoption of their CBDC, they are taking a page from Nigeria's book, which they shouldn't do, and the DR's book, which they should do, and they're allowing tourists to pay for cabs and other reservations with their CBDC. So they're looking at basically promoting adoption by by having the people who are in bringing money to the country paying in the dollar that they have desired. So it's kind of a different way to do it. If you've ever been to Jamaica, you know that you can pay for almost anything with the US dollar, but now they might change that so that you're paying with a CBDC.
Interesting. I guess that might be one of the pros of having a CBDC, but I wonder why there's more adoption in the Caribbean countries.
Yeah, so I read a little bit about it a few months ago. This could be out of date now, but part of it had to do with rural adoption rates because basically Caribbean citizens were underserved if they weren't living in a larger city. And it's quite difficult and expensive to get to larger cities. And so the CBDC had like really good mobile integration so that you could go and start paying retailers with something digital, whereas you might not actually trust a bank. And if there was no physical entity for that bank, you were saving a lot of fees by not using the bank and instead using the CBDC. So kind of interesting. I don't know.
Interesting. I feel like it's still not replacing that cash.
No,
Going to a garage sale or bartering down, at a market.
I think it would be really hard to replace cash. Like we saw Nigeria took to the streets when they tried to have a cash shortage. Like cash is king, right?
Yeah, and I just think that's probably the struggle against the CBDCs for sure.
The other thing that's interesting about this actually is that Bali, I believe it was Bali and not general Indonesia, went the exact opposite direction. So they banned your ability to be able to pay for any tourism with crypto. And they even like held tourists in jail for trying to pay cabbies with crypto and that kind of thing. So we have the Caribbean that's trying to have an influx of cash via their CBDC so that they can have wider adoption of their CBDC. And meanwhile, in Bali, they're like, no crypto, screw you, we're not doing it.
Are they like that for their citizens as well, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. It's also interesting though, because if crypto continues to grow the way that it is and more people are holding crypto and more people are comfortable with CBDCs and you're selecting a tourist destination, you'll probably pick the one where you can spend your money.
Yeah, I don't know. The government business is thriving, especially when they're trying to block crypto finances. So
okay, but what if you meant to be a tourist somewhere, but you actually had citizenship because of your crypto activity?
This, I think, is going to be one thing that will be mainstream adopted.
Do you think so?
I do. I honestly do. I just don't see a world where you have regulation without having KYC. And I mean, there's a big difference between privacy and being anonymous. And that's where the conversation, I think, will center. But right now, like even with Tashi, we have we're partnered with Quadrata. And we actually get zero access to our users' information, but we can query their digital ID, their digital password that they KYC'd with Quadrata, and then we know that they are approved to use our protocol because they're outside of the US or Canada. So I think it's definitely going to be something that is widely adopted.
What about the concept of being able to get a citizenship via your KYC? It's pretty wild.
It is pretty wild. I just don't know if it's like, do they consider it citizenship or do they consider it like financial citizenship, basically, like participate in the markets or?
So Huobi, which is partially owned by Sun, who also owns Tron, Huobi has introduced a Dominica metaverse-bound token. And basically, if you complete 3-tier KYC on Huobi, which involves biometrics, by the way, if you complete that, you are offered a tokenized identity that offers citizenship in the Dominica metaverse, but also serves as a government-issued ID. Like you can get a physical ID so that you can go whatever, buy booze or whatever you're going to do in the DR. And they believe, well, it is believed widely in an op-ed kind of way, that this is how people who live in nations where crypto is banned, how they will be able to circumvent that. So if you're in like China or India or something like that, where you're only allowed to use the government-issued crypto, but you want to be participating in a different way, if you have dual citizenship, you can then participate over here. And why this is interesting is that if you're in one of those countries, it's probably a country where it's really hard to get dual citizenship. But if you're willing to just give up your biometrics and KYC, triple down in KYC, now you have this citizenship token.
Very cool.
I don't know. I think it's
I don't know how it's going to play out, but and I don't know how that's going to work. And I'm sure that those governments are just going to find some way to, ban it in a way like you're not actually a dual citizen. That doesn't count.
I wonder about that. And I also wonder about like what happens if you become a technical citizen of that place too. Can they alter their tax law? Can they enforce enlistment? Like, I don't know. What are all the
options can you have? For example, like if you KYC in 5 to 10 different countries,
absolutely,
are you a citizen of all of them? And then what kind of taxes do you pay? Are you only subject to their country's taxes?
Exactly.
There's a lot.
Before we go, we have like hit our time because we have a lot of opinions. But before we go, I want to ask you what you think about crypto and nefarious activity, specifically because Europol, which is the Economic Crime Threat Assessment Unit of European Finance, Europol has quote unquote embraced blockchain, but they basically have sounded the alarm that there's an NFT and DeFi crime surge.
I honestly think that it just depends what is being publicized. To be honest, there's nefarious activity everywhere on everything, TradFi, DeFi, and I vehemently try to disagree with that narrative because I just think that it helps so many people and that it helps me financially, and it just brings so much more financial autonomy and education that it's just no. I vehemently am fuddy about anyone that is it doesn't mean ignore it. It doesn't mean that it's not there and it's not happening, to do your research and to make sure that you take measures to be secure. It just means that just because there are bad people and bad things happen doesn't mean that it's not a good thing, for example.
It was a really good summary. Thank you. I'm glad that we closed on that. It's like reducing the FUD, which is our whole point, even though we're really bad at it because I'm a fuddy person. I'm a tin hat person. Lindsay has joined us today from Tashi. Do you want to give a Tashi shout out?
I do. I love to talk about Tashi. But I guess I've already told you guys everything that's coming down the pipeline for Tashi. But, maybe just take a look into the cosmos. There is a lot of cool things happening. There is a lot of crazy innovation and, just like the IBC protocol, just take a look into it. There's a lot of ways to level up your finances in the Cosmos ecosystem. And Tashi will be providing a place for your assets to land very shortly.
So exciting. Well, we are a live show Monday to Friday. Usually it's JD. Sometimes it's me. And lately we've had a lot of guests. So if you want to be a guest or want to see a guest, let us know. Like, share, subscribe, do all that jazz. But Lindsay, go find yourself.
Thank you. very much for having me, and go FUD yourself, Kiara.